Hi Matteo, Janine here. How can I manage my money better? I want to get my finances under control and start budgeting, but where do I start?
Welcome to this episode of Everything Counts. On this podcast, we'll have a frank discussion about your money and your future wealth. This week, we do a little introspection in our financial journey, drawing up the dreaded budget. Do you have one? How good are you at tracking your spending? And when it's needed, are you able to cut on some of your luxuries? To answer these questions and more, we're joined by seasoned financial advisor at Investec, Khomotso Motloung. He's an experienced financial planner. Also joined by Maya Fisher-French, a former stockbroker, now South Africa's leading financial consumer journalist, the founder of Maya on Money, and editor of the Money Pages at the City Press. She's also brought us Money Matters on ENCA. Let's get into it. Maya, let's then get into the conversation around budgeting. When somebody looks at your profile, they probably think you've got a master's in budgeting. And so what's the point of me trying? But tell us your budgeting story and when you started.
I probably do now have a master's in budgeting, but that's only because I woke up one day and realized I'd better start budgeting. So I did my first budget at the age of 32. And like so many people, I did it because I was in financial difficulty. We mentioned in the previous episode, one of those stories of life, I went off and bought this huge fixer-upper of a house with a huge bond that we didn't really need. At the same time, within 18 months, I lost my job. My husband lost his job. So we really went into a bad place. And like everybody else who finds themselves in that situation, we didn't change our lifestyles. So we continued to spend because, my husband got a job and then I went into freelance and we just kind of didn't have a budget. So we didn't know actually what we were spending. And one of the big problems, of course, with having an overdraft facility, which is what we had then and not now, is when you swipe the card, it just goes through, okay? The payment goes through. Anyway, one day we woke up, had the realization, and I thought, this cannot continue. And for the very first time, we drew up our household budget. I remember bursting into tears. I actually sobbed because what was coming in was a lot smaller than what was going out. And so much of what I write about and a lot of the things that I share with people is actually from personal experience. It's how do you get to that point where you are spending more than you earn because you weren't keeping track. But now today, and I'm talking, my son is now just turned 20. So we've been doing this for 20 years. And it continues to be the cornerstone of our entire financial well-being and financial plan is knowing where our money's going. It was actually Dave Ramsey. It's one of my favorite quotes of all time. He said, if you do not tell your money where to go, it will leave. And I can tell you now, if you're sitting listening to this, saying, I don't know how to start, I don't know where to go, it starts with writing down everything you're spending.
Khomotso, we have all sorts of excuses when it comes to budget. Some will tell you, I'm not earning enough, so what's the point? Some will tell you, I'm a bit cash flush, so I don't really look at my accounts and where exactly the money goes. I don't have to worry about it. But why is it so important to sit down and actually draw a budget?
It's so crucial. The greatest thing about a budget, it will help you identify unnecessary expenses, things that are just getting away from you. Also, what it does, it promotes better planning. It really allows for you to kind of get into a place where you can actually better plan, and then also the nice thing about having a budget in place, it helps you now work towards goals, which is then also important. So it gives more structure. It tells you the truth about your spending habits. It's also like a reflection tool. We always look at a budget as a future document, but it's also a good way for you to reflect. To be like, actually, I had these goals for the month. How did I actually perform?
Well, Khomotso, you're reminding us that numbers don't lie, and that's why we should be looking at our bank statements and where the money is going. But Maya, when we do get into that spending plan, what are we looking at when we sit down and draw a budget? What goes first and what should be going last?
This is actually where people get stuck. They're like, okay, so now what? I would just say to everyone, spend a month writing everything you've spent down. And even if you've got the energy, go through the last 3 months of bank statements, understand what does this look like now? Because that kind of gives you a sense of where your money is going. And then there's 101 ways to budget. So there's the zero-based budgeting. There is the 50-30-20 rule and all of those. So it depends, I think, what works for you. Zero-based budgeting, for example, is quite an interesting one. It's just basically saying that your income minus your expenses equals zero. So remember I went back to that thing about if you don't tell your money where to go, it will leave. This means every last cent has been given a job. And it is paying the rent or the mortgage, or it's the food, it's the savings, the emergency savings, retirement. So every last cent is accounted for. Then other people say, well, how much should I be spending on rent and how much should I be spending on car finance? And there's this 50, 30, 20 principle. So 50 on needs and obligations, 30 on wants, things that you want, and 20% on savings. I'm not crazy about those figures for South Africa. I think, first of all, in South Africa, needs are probably 60% because so many people are supporting family members. And everyone has a different view whether 50% includes your debt repayments. Is that your house payment? It gets confusing. For me, there are two big things you should be watching: debt and investing or savings, because this is where people go horribly wrong. So the maximum for me that you, in your budget, you say the maximum I will be spending on debt repayments is 35% of my take-home pay. And when I say that, please, I'm not saying 35% on your credit card. That has to include your home and your car finance. And the reason we say 35% is when I speak to debt counselors, they tell me that the minute people get to 40%, they become financially vulnerable. At 40%, an emergency happens, life happens, and you tip over. So you want to be keeping it at about 35%. And if you were doing the budget and perhaps you don't have a home yet, your rent should almost be allocated as part of that 35%, if that makes sense. And short-term credit cards, personal loans, store cards should never be more than 5%. Okay, so that kind of helps, I think, give people a little bit of a framework on the debt, because that's actually what most people blow out on. And then when it comes to saving, minimum of 25%. You know, you've got 15% maybe into your retirement fund, 5% into tax-free savings, 5% liquidity being your emergency fund. That kind of gives you an overview. That then leaves 60%. By the time you've done your debt and your savings, that leaves 60% for day-to-day living, which includes your needs and wants. But then it's actually up to you how you want to spend it. If you want to spend on toilet paper or champagne, you get to choose. You could choose the one-ply toilet paper so that you can have champagne. And I think we must be very careful about telling people what their needs and wants are. As long as they're keeping the debt under control and they're doing the savings, how you allocate it from there is really up to you.
So the better the budgeting, you might get a chance to splurge if you do it well. Then, Kgomoso, when we look at our budget, then how do you get into that spending of the money? Do you do it in portions and putting away money for the certain things that you need to take care of in the month? Or do you make sure that you are disciplined enough in order to spend your money?
Oh, Mateo, discipline is such an important thing, right? When I see people, when I look at the finances, the biggest challenge is that when working out the month, you don't break it down. So you should break up the month. It's easier. It's more palatable. You have it in bite-sized chunks, right? So even if you spend petrol weekly driving, understand what that week will look like, right? And discipline is important. So if you're going to take, for example, lunch to work, take lunch to work. Don't necessarily now go to the cafeteria, which you hadn't planned, because then that's $100 every day, 5 days a week. That's $500 that's gone out your budget, which has now a little bit more of an impact towards end of the month. So discipline is a key component.
I want to jump in there. I think I've mentioned this Money Makeover program that we do. So I've seen people's spending behavior. But I want to tell you a story of Sandra. So she was one of my candidates last year, and she was coming halfway through the month and was running out of money. And halfway through the month, you run out of money, you pull out the credit card. So she had this credit card debt. We got her to track her spending just for 1 month, and she wrote down everything she spent. And she had this complete aha moment. And that was that on payday, I have the wealth effect. I'm rich, I'm a millionaire, and I go off and I went out for dinner and I bought my girl a little dress and I did this and I did that. And then, halfway through the month, you're on the credit card. But what she did by tracking is for little things like she realized how many nappies she bought for the month. So instead of buying the nappies once a week or every 2 weeks, she bought all the nappies up front. So all the big expenses that she knew she was going to have for the month now, so nappies were all bought up front, non-perishable groceries, she paid for electricity for the month. And then she worked out her weekly spend. How much would I top up with on fresh fruit and vegetables? How much would I need for transport each week? And she allocated those funds. Do you know that in the second month, Sandra made it through to the end of the month without her credit card? Wow. That is how powerful understanding where your money goes is.
Often we budget in isolation. How important is it to make sure that you call either your mom that you send money to every month, or if you're living with a 4-member family, to say, everyone, let's get involved. This is what the budget's looking like. Because that's the best way to try and manage it, right? To make sure that everyone is involved. Otherwise, somebody's going to pick at the budget even when you're not ready for them to.
I can't begin to tell you how important that is, hey? I mean, Khmotso, you'll agree. I mean, if you're in a relationship or you've got children or you're supporting extended family, you have to sit down and show them the budget and discuss the budget. And even as a family, saying, well, what are our priorities? What are our values? And a value discussion is a very, very telling one about your alignments and your goals. So I think from the experience that I've had, somebody cannot on their own, if they're in a relationship or supporting family, they cannot do it on their own without that conversation.
And Khomotso, how hard is it then to guide a client in that process of telling the family that we're a bit tight on money, I think we should be having a budget now? What kind of procedures should they be going through to make sure that they can stick to the budget firstly, but everyone is supporting the process?
I think, Mateo, money is such an emotional thing. And we often see it quite a lot where there's a bit of shame around certain circumstances, a bit of embarrassment. But I think the point where you can be honest about your finances to your partner or your family, it's a good starting point. And we all come from different households and backgrounds, right? I come from a background where we didn't speak about money, right? No one sat me around the table and said, okay, Khomotso, here's a salary, money goes here, money goes there. And it's very different, right? So you find households where those conversations are had. And what we find is that those households where those conversations are had, where parents are involving the kids, spouses are involving each other, they are much healthier financially. So like I said, for me, money had always been a sore point because in my household, we didn't discuss money. So, for example, if I was young and I wanted something and I couldn't get it, there was no way to bring it back to say, okay, this is the reason why we can't get this thing. It's like, no, you can't get it. There's no money. Finished. That was a conversation, right? But I mean, for me, it's a lot different because I've got little ones who now I can have the conversation to be like, okay, but the reason why you can't get this toy is X, Y, and Z. So those dinner conversations, those honest conversations are important.
I had such an interesting conversation with a financial advisor last week. And he was saying those clients of his that actively budgeted for family support, it was part of the budget, it was a conversation they had, so it's the mom and brother or whatever they're supporting, were more financially successful over time. And I don't know what that is. Is it that they're planners by nature and they're prepared to have those conversations? But being able to have that conversation, put it in the budget and, have a plan in place over time, they are more ahead financially and in terms of wealth accumulation. So there's definitely a link somewhere in being able to have those conversations.
No, 100%, man, 100%. I think couples that are more aligned, families that are more aligned, they definitely have better financial outcomes. And we've seen that time and time and time again. It's a story that repeats itself. I've also had a personal friend. He got into this relationship and there was an expectation that there's a certain lifestyle that they should be living, right? And quickly after like a year of the relationship, he came to me like, Khomotso, I actually can't keep up. I really can't keep up with the holidays and all of these things. But just to find that the challenge there was that she thought he earned more than what he earned. And the issue wasn't what he earned. And it turns out that she actually earned more than him. That just shows where the conversations and where the assumptions can cause a bit of...
And that budget will bring the transparency between
100%.
Between the two. Then let's talk about the important factor of budgeting when it comes to savings. We know about South Africa's poor savings culture. So how do you sit down and say, from what I'm earning, from what I'm paying for in terms of expenses, I need to leave some money off to save? Do you automate that if you're not disciplined enough?
I wanted to answer that in two parts. The first part is also planning for variable expenses, which is also saving. So what I find blows a lot of people out is they do the monthly budget, but they don't do the quarterly budget or the annual budget. And I had a very good example. I was looking at a woman's bank statements. And I said, why are you going into overdraft every 3 months? And she said, well, my children's creche fees are due. It's quarterly. So I said, but they're coming. This is not a surprise, right? You are sending your child to creche every day. When you're doing your monthly budget, if you know you've got an expense that you have to pay every quarter or whatever, you include that in your monthly budget. So easy maths, 12,000 Rand for the year is the school fees. That's 1,000 Rand a month. put the 1,000 Rand in as a monthly, and then save that every month into a little savings pocket. All our banking apps have them. You must see my banking app, right? I've got school fees, medical bills, holiday fund, and that is actually a really great way. So it's also saving for the next month, 2 months, maybe next year's school fees. There's that very short-term saving that you need to be doing so that you don't land up going into overdraft. Everyone that you ever speak to never has money to save. Never. Until you go through the budget. And there's always money there. So it's a choice. And, ultimately it's about what's more important. And then the most important thing is absolutely the automated debit order. It goes off before anything goes off. My son, we started a debit order for him. He was 2 years old, 200 Rand a month. Somewhere it went to 300 Rand a month. It was just in a tracker fund, nothing special. By the time he was 14, it was 100,000 Rand. So little amounts do grow over time.
Khubotso, then still looking at saving, right? You are approached by different clients who earn differently. It could be a graduate who's just starting out. It could be somebody who's quite high up. Some people may think if you are in the C-suite, you're not saving money at that point, or you're not investing as much as you used to throughout your career. So how do you advise people differently based on their earnings in terms of savings?
No, Mattia, I think it's so important, right? Because our financial journeys are different. Right. If I look at a young professional who we bank and we assist, we find with them it's a blank sheet, right? It's a blank sheet, and we draft the plan from a blank sheet and we put it together, right? With the young people, it's more about forward thinking, and it's more about building good financial habits by having structure and then having them set their goals, and then we marry that with the right products. But what I find with individuals that are a little bit later on in their careers, maybe they're a little bit settled in their careers, now they want to start a family, now it's a bit different. It's about now roping in your partner, and then we're looking at a financial plan that encompasses you and your partner and future planning. So also then we have clients who have kind of gone through some difficult challenges where maybe they might have loss of income, maybe overspend, bad credit record. That's a different approach as well. So with those type of clients, it's more now the psychology of money and kind of reversing those bad habits, right? So I always use the analogy, especially with older clients, to say the greatest golfer in the history of golf, in my opinion, Tiger Woods, still has a coach. So what does that mean for our finances? Okay, I think that you can never stop learning, right? No matter how long you've been in industry, you're an executive, you can still learn and you can still be coached. But I really think that every life stage, we need to address certain financial obligations and goals, and then be able to categorize them like that.
There is still the issue of the Excel document. People will tell you it looks like rocket science to me. I'm not touching it. So what are the easy ways of getting into budgeting tools and things that can help you to make sure you have a far easier month than you had before?
There's so many brilliant tools out there now. They're using what they call artificial intelligence, where they actually categorize your spending for you. Many of the banks, actually, Investix Tracker does that as well, where it'll take your spending and it categorizes it for you. So it'll say, oh, here's your grocery spend, your eating out spend, because it's worked it out. And you can usually go in and edit and say, well, actually, when I go to Woolworths, it's more clothes and not food, or vice versa. So sometimes you need to tweak it. And that can give you a very quick overview, actually, of your spending. I use 22/7 because that also brings in all your investments, does a lot of the work for you.
I know it's hard for us to look at banking statements and the numbers that tell our real lives what we live in, because our cards do tell on us, don't they? How do you make sure that you have a budget, it's strict, you follow it, but you still have some lives to live? You still go on brunches with your friends, and you can afford a little bit of fun from the hard work and sweat that you go through every month.
So I revealed my very personal life event of going into debt earlier on. And one of the ways we got out of debt was actually using the envelope system, which is where we would actually draw cash for the week, and it would be labeled food, petrol. But we always had an envelope that said entertainment, always, even in the toughest time. Entertainment may be going out for coffee and not going fine dining. Things may change, but you definitely need to have nice things in your budget. And I personally have a holiday slush fund, and it's actually called a holiday slush fund on my banking app. That's what it says. And that allows me to go on holiday without taking out my credit card, because ultimately you're going to want those things. So if you say, I'm not going to spend on anything, you're going to break and you're going to put it on credit card. So I think absolutely important, makes life worth living.
No, I think I should take that advice, because whenever I'm on holiday, I'm always overspending. Khomotso, looking at wrestling, the finances to make sure that, yes, I'm taken care of on the day to day, and I'm saving for my future wealth, but also at the same time, I have some money left over to live a little.
Yeah, I think, Mattia, it's always important, and it will always tie back to goals, right? I always think if you're able to tie your budget and your finances to goals, you're able to then navigate that much better. It becomes fun and exciting, right? If you're always going to look at budgeting as this negative, I'm sitting with an advisor and it's going to be a hard, dark conversation, we'll never have a positive approach to our finances, right? So I always say set goals, the short-term, medium-term, long-term goals, and let's then put your finances in a position that we can also achieve those goals. That will make it fun. So that holiday that you have, you don't necessarily have to swipe with the credit card, as Maya said, but we can actually plan for it to say, okay, this time next year, the holiday is going to cost me 60,000 Rand. How do we get there? So say, okay, cool. Let's set up a holiday account to say, okay, this is particularly going to address for that, and we're going to save to that. Trust me, you're going to enjoy your holiday a lot more when you didn't swipe it on your credit card, whereas you plan for it. And we always talk about it, right? That instant gratification, right? And I think if we can prolong that instant gratification, it'll allow us to have more fun with our finances and enjoy those things that we really want.
Well, let's put away a bit of time ourselves. After this, we'll be talking about how we can stay motivated to stick to the budget.
Money talks, they say. But do you know the lingo? Improve your financial fluency. Follow Investec Focus Radio SA wherever you get your podcasts and hear what the smart money has to say. Investec Bank Limited is a licensed FSP. T's and C's apply.
And we're back, and we're talking about budgeting and tracking your spending. Let's look now at how to stay motivated. It's all good and well to start off with the budget. You know what you're spending on, you know what you're saving on, but how do you make sure you keep to it for a long period of time?
It's hard. I think progress helps. And you remember I spoke about the net asset value, the net worth, yes, in the last episode. So for me, I find that quite a good motivator. I like seeing my money grow. Maybe it's my personality type. So when you can see, and what I do see when we take people through a money boot camp is when they see their debts dropping, when they see their investments grow, it feeds on itself. So I think seeing progress helps you stay motivated. Don't get upset if you blow the budget 1 month or whatever. Just, it's absolutely fine, sort of start again and recap. And I think, also just checking in the beginning, and it's certainly not something I still do, but in the beginning, just make 1 day a week. If it's a Friday, Saturday, go look at what you spent over that week. Just get in touch and, you'll see, I didn't really need that third coffee, did I? Or I'd rather have spent on this. So I think it is just having a relationship with your money, getting in tune with your money. That'll help you keep motivated. And probably the most important thing that I can say to anyone is, if you don't have the credit card and you go shopping, you can't use the credit card. So that also just helps. Sometimes you've got to put protection in against your own behavior.
Maya, I think another thing when it comes to budgeting, when people get it right, they don't celebrate their wins. And I think that's a very important thing. Celebrate your big wins, but also celebrate your small wins. Have a thing in your budget where if I stick to it, I'm going to reward myself, or I'll put something where there's an end goal. So it's a fun way that you can approach your budget, and you can celebrate those big and those small wins. I think that will also keep you motivated to sticking to that budget.
And I also just want to say, be realistic with your budget. So what I often see people saying, I only spend X on groceries. It's unrealistic. You're not going to stick to that. So go look at your past behavior and say, okay, maybe I was getting a little bit frivolous. But if you are too strict, you won't be able to stick to it, and that can be demotivating. So be realistic when you're setting up your budget.
Then let's look at the tips and mistakes that one can make when drawing a budget. Those biggest mistakes, Maya?
Okay, seeing as we're being open and honest here, I have a spending problem in a very particular area, and that is when I go on holiday. Something happens, especially if I go on an overseas holiday. Something like switches off in my brain, and I just buy things. And I was speaking to a behavioral psychologist about it, and he said to me, what it is that you are an experienced person. That's my personality. You love experiences, and you want to bring back a piece of that experience. And that's why you buy all this rubbish and then come home and wonder what to do with it. So that actually helped. I went on a really big holiday to Japan recently. I'd saved for it for 9 years because COVID had stopped it halfway through. And first of all, I had that filter about what am I buying and why am I buying it, because I had insight into myself. And I must say it helped a lot. I bought a lot less junk. But the other thing is I literally doubled my spending. I said, this is my spending budget, and I doubled it because I'd saved more now. And for the first time, I didn't blow my budget. So I think be realistic as long as it's not going on your credit card.
My budgeting skills have certainly improved, and thank you so much to Janine for her question and all those insights that came through from Maya and Khomotso. In our next episode, our latest question is from Sim, and this is what she wants to know.
Hey Mateo, Sim here. I really don't like debt. My father always said it was a trap. I've never liked the idea of it, but it feels like it just comes with the territory. How do I start paying off my debt and finally start saving?
Thank you very much to Sim. You can also send your questions by using the hashtag #InvesTech.
The views expressed are those of the contributors at the time of publication and do not necessarily represent the views of the firm and should not be taken as advice or recommendations. Investec Private Banking, a division of Investec Bank Limited, a registered credit provider committed to the Code of Banking Practice as regulated by the Ombudsman for Banking Services.